Hello, my name is Tolg and I exist, therefore I think too much. I don't know if I did the right introduction to the Marguerite Porete video. I don't know. Anyways, I'm reading Fred's book of Beyond Good and Evil. I've said it before in a previous video, but I don't know who's tuning in, when, where, and why. My personal belief of what is beyond good and evil, what is good and evil, rather, is what is necessary versus what is unnecessary. And I think that is the most objective reality that one can exist in. What is necessary is what is good. What is unnecessary is what is evil. And the subjectivity of life is understanding that one person will never know the objective truth. So do your damnedest to realize what is unnecessary in a situation and what is necessary. And there are gradients of what is least necessary versus what is most unnecessary. And that is what is least evil versus what is most evil. Like, tripping on a rug is unnecessary, but I wouldn't, burn the witch for tripping on a rug versus the Epstein list. Totally, entirely unnecessary. Money laundering using offshore banking. Totally, wildly unnecessary. Absolutely evil. Therein, so what is beyond good and evil? Certainly both Nietzsche and I do not know. The first chapter is the prejudices of philosophers, at which point he just goes over his prejudices against philosophers. And the second chapter is called The Free Spirit, at which point I'm pretty sure he's spelling out that he believes man to not have freedom at all, which, yeah, the argument can definitely be made. And that's where we are, is that Friedrich had a difficult time being a philosopher, born in 1840. So I presume his work is from 1860 to 1890. And the introduction of other fields of study as well would have threatened his pocketbook. Being a philosopher during that time, looking at your peers, trying to figure out who's in the field of philosophy just to support their life versus who is actually attempting to philosophize, try to understand the structure of life or the reason to it, and then how important what you're doing is or unimportant therein. And I think that gave rise to this writing, is why? The question, the perpetual question, and the angst of life. Why? So I am on point 32. I'll probably just read 32 and 33 depending on how small 33 ends up being, or not. Probably not, though, because he's getting into a very long-winded, almost panic attack, it seems. So 32, throughout the longest period of human history, one calls it the prehistoric period. Oh, interesting. The value or non-value of an action was inferred from its consequences. Wow, we have lost respect for that. Honestly, generally speaking, I think most of humanity has lost understanding for value, the ability to appreciate honest value. And the reality that value is a subjective truth rather than an objective truth. Putting a price tag on everything made value seem objective, when that coat might matter more to me than it matters to my neighbor who has 5 coats, The action in itself was not taken into consideration any more than its origin. But pretty much as in China at present, where the distinction or disgrace of a child redounds to its parents. Social credit. Interesting, though. Not necessarily inherited social credit, but like the opposite of inheriting. Though that does speak on, there's this movie My mom made me watch it as a means of trying to poke at me to say, is it my fault or your fault? We need to talk about Kenny, or there's something wrong with Kenny, one of those two. And the argument made is it nature or is it nurture? When I was asked, I said both. But I guess the argument for this child, how the child ends up can disgrace the parents, is an argument for nurture prominently rather than nature. The retro-operating power of success or failure was what induced men to think well or ill of an action. Let us call this period the pre-moral period of mankind. How is that pre-morals? That's interesting. Morals are subjective. Based on the society and what the society holds as worthy or goodly. I don't think you'd be able to say there was a time before morality. Just a time before your understood version of morality. Anyways, Fred's calling that the period of pre-moral mankind. The imperative, know thyself, was then still unknown. Bullshit. It just depended on what class you were a part of to be able to know yourself, which, very similar to today, can you afford time to get to know yourself? Are you overworked and overstimulated and cannot sit down to be able to ponder intrinsically or introspectively? But yeah, were you a farmhand or a noble, especially if taking into consideration China? Otherwise, know thyself was not unknown. Jesus, the Tao, for fuck's sake. In the last 10,000 years, on the other hand, maybe that's the distinction, 10,000 years, my bad. I'm sorry. On the other hand, on certain large portions of the earth, one has gradually got so far that one no longer lets the consequences of an action but its origin decide with regard to its worth. A great achievement as a whole, an important refinement of vision and of criterion, the unconscious effect of the supremacy of aristocratic values and of the belief in origin, the mark of a period which may be designated in the narrower sense of the moral one. So, the consequences of the great achievement was not judged, it was the origin from which the great achievement arose. Whether the man was drunk and tripped into the great achievement or had studied for 20 years and found the great achievement thereafter mattered more than finding the great achievement at all. That is also a differentiation between then and now, because US CIA definitely came out in a video recently and said, the ends justifies the means. The unconscious effect of the supremacy of aristocratic values, not intending to affect something by the supremacy of aristocracy. Or rather, aristocracy's values. For 1840 to 1890, let's say, from the time he was born, because he would have been instilled with his subconscious drive from 0 to 6 like anyone. So, 1840 to 1890. I think that's Victorian period. aristocracy in Victorian England was very, very much in line with trying to follow gossip to be able to discern where the money was. Aristocratic values, as far as I understand it, was who do you line yourself with to be able to not become a social faux pas. How to be graced by gossip instead of fall victim to it. Certainly there was still some amount of noblesse oblige, but it wasn't practiced by a lot of people. And it is very much similar to today. If you have money, make a show of donating it, even if, there's I think the Mormon church abuses this tale from the Bible. Was it the Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses? One of them. A woman goes to church and gives like $5 to tithing. And her peers are ridiculing her because who gives just $5 when the people around you are giving a few K, whatever it is. The understanding being that you give 25% of what you have to tithe. 10%, 25%, really depends on which church you go to. Some churches actually demand that you give them your paycheck to be able to accurately assess how much you need to be giving to God. God, quote unquote. And the story goes that this woman, that what she tithed, those $5, was her bus fare for the entire week, and that's how she gets back and forth from working. So what she did was sacrifice her ability to ride to work and home in comfort, and had to walk for hours in order to do that. Whereas this person who had donated a few K, however much it was, still lived in comfort, was still able to eat, still drove, still had all the comforts they were very much used to, did not sacrifice all that they had, where she did. And so the notion therein gets abused to, you should be giving all that you have. Look at how much greater she is for having given all she had, while it's just $5. You didn't even touch that. Noblesse oblige makes it look good on the surface, but does it actually cut into anything? Does the wealthy pay their taxes? And while you demonize, the poor in the U.S. for using EBT, here in Omaha, one of our senators just got a $3 million fucking aid from the government after killing a kid on his farm from overworking in poor conditions. So, noblesse oblige. You giving everything you have, or are you, I got side-railed, sorry. Derailed. Side-railed? Derailed is what I meant. Yeah, this is confusing me, though. The unconscious effect of the supremacy of aristocratic values. It's like egotistically wanting to slip in the word supremacy there, because the effect of the supremacy of the values rather than the effect of the values themselves. And then unconscious leads me to believe that that's just trying to distance yourself from what it is you said, so that, you're not coming off as the egotist that you are. Otherwise, what would it matter, the unconscious or conscious effect of the values, when you are trying to take into consideration the origin of them at all? Unless you are trying to make a statement that the values of aristocracy are bred into them to such an extent that it is lived out in an unconscious way, where those who were not brought up due to poverty, and I believe 1800s Victorian England still had quite a issue with unions not existing for the people. Child labor laws didn't exist. There were unsafe workplaces as well. So, I mean, you're going to demonize the less fortunate. You have to understand how much is actually being extracted from their person and how much they can realistically afford. Are they giving everything they have, and are you still living in comfort whilst you scoff at them? So, unconscious, those living in poverty who are giving everything they have would have to consciously live into morals, because otherwise they're probably fucking tired. Why do they have to care if they're wearing a fucking corset or not? They're carrying a 10-pound bag of potatoes, whatever the fuck it was. The mark of a period which may be designated in the narrower sense of the moral one. The first attempt at self-knowledge is thereby made. When? In the last 10,000 years. So many words were had between that. I'm wondering if anybody would have been able to follow that had they not, stopped to make an ass out of themselves like I am and question it. So in the last 10,000 years, the first attempt was made at introspection. That's a long period of time. I mean, if you want to speak in generality, it keeps you safe. So he's got that going for him. Instead of the consequences, the origin. What an inversion of perspective. That reminds me of John Dewey. There was a quote that John Dewey said. I'm going to have to edit out me trying to find the quote now. Ha! Found it. Okay, so in John Dewey's paper, I think, speech, I'm not sure how to categorize this, but it's called Human Nature and Conduct by Dewey. There is a bit Society excuses itself by laying the blame on the criminal. He retorts by putting the blame on bad early surroundings, the temptations of others, lack of opportunities, and the persecutions of officers of the law. Both are right, except in the wholesale character of their recriminations. But the effect on both sides is to throw the whole matter back into antecedent causation, a method which refuses to bring the matter to truly moral judgment. For morals has to do with acts still within our control, acts still to be performed. No amount of guilt on the part of the evildoer absolves us from responsibility for the consequences upon him and others of our way of treating him, or from our continuing responsibility for the conditions under which persons develop perverse habits. But the moral issue concerns the future. It is prospective, to content ourselves with pronouncing judgments of merit and demerit without reference to the fact that our judgments are themselves facts which have consequences, and that their value depends upon their consequences, is complacently to dodge the moral issue, perhaps even to indulge ourselves in pleasurable passion just as the person we condemned once indulged himself. The moral problem is that of modifying the factors which now influence future results. Our own schemes of judgment, of assigning blame and praise, of awarding punishment and honor are part of these conditions. Conditions needed to change the working character or will of another. We cannot change habit directly. That notion is magic, but we can change it indirectly by modifying conditions, by an intelligent selecting and weighing of the objects which engage attention and which influence the fulfillment of desires. There's that. It's a good book. I read it every now and again, so I haven't read all of it, but 18th century, so something like 1700. Let's see, I can find how many times it was copyrighted. Or no, 1900s. I've got the centuries all backwards. 1918. Okay, so this Human Nature and Conduct by Dewey was written in 1918, which was after Nietzsche's time. Another person that I think Nietzsche would have enjoyed a conversation with, or maybe gotten really annoyed with, but would have been worth having all the same. I don't know where I left off. Consequences, the origin, inversion of perspective, and assuredly an inversion effected only after long struggle and wavering. To be sure, an ominous new superstition, a peculiar narrowness of interpretation, attained supremacy precisely thereby. The origin of an action was interpreted in the most definite sense possible, as origin out of an intention, rather than a lack of intention, accident. People were agreed in the belief that the value of an action lay in the value of its intention. The intention as the sole origin and antecedent history of an action. Under the influence of this prejudice, moral praise and blame have been bestowed, and men have judged and even philosophized almost up to the present day. Another rant. So I have done things. Ta-da. Definitely accidentally too. And when I led on to the individual that I had accidentally done it, it wasn't saying that I wouldn't have purposefully done it, but it was admission so that, I don't know, I didn't want to be held in esteem that I did not earn. If I knew it was happening, certainly I would have done it, but I didn't know it was happening. Apparently, not a brag. Again, I don't hold myself in esteem for doing this. There was a really bad party I was at, and two friends were in a corner, and I probably had too much sugar. I don't know. I was trying to hype things up, and I'm blind in the dark. I don't know if it's due to anemia. I'm not really sure what's going on. But yeah, so I didn't see what I was doing, and I was running around the room looking for like this prop of a pitchfork. And I thought someone was holding it because I could see their hand, but I couldn't see what was going on. So I grabbed what I thought was the pitchfork, and it was not a pitchfork. And later my friend, and I just ran off afterwards, but my friend came up and said, "Hey, thanks. Apparently being threatened with a knife," and I grabbed the knife. I don't know how I didn't know that, but I let her know that I didn't intend to do that because I just wanted to be honest. If I was going to be praised for something, if I was going to be thanked for something, I wanted it to be intended. But again, you know, if I had known that was happening, I would have done more than just grab that fucking knife. Shit. And so if I'm going to be acknowledged for something, I want it to be purposeful. And when it says, you know, the origin of an action matters more than the action, absolutely it mattered that I grabbed that knife, and I'm glad I did. I don't know the end result, and I trust that the person holding it wouldn't actually have done anything, to be real. I wish the origin of my action had been what my friend wanted, emotional support. I would have given the emotional support, I just didn't know the situation needed it. And that's what I wanted to be honest about. And I think when I told my friend that I hadn't known what was going on, she received it as though my intention was that I wouldn't have done that had I known. And I might have hurt her feelings, which hurts my feelings, because I would love for my friends to feel supported. I didn't know that was the end result of saying I hadn't intended something. if I'm going to be held accountable, especially in a positive way, I want it to be purposed. I want to be praised for something I intended to do. I want to have earned that. But this says it was accidental, so I earned it anyways. I don't know, man. It is not possible, however, that the necessity may now have arisen of... I mean, I guess it's important that it stopped on her end and on anybody else's end. But the origin of the action matters when the intention matters. And the intention matters in relation to relationships. What that could mean for a future built off of a lack of intention. That could be it. I freeze when I'm scared is the other thing. So I intend to do good things. I just don't know that I would have the ability to do good things. Once a jet flew way too close to the house I was sitting at, and I just stopped drinking my drink. It looked like a Pepsi commercial ad, where it was it just froze. Okay, I'll start over, sorry. Is it not possible, however, that the necessity may now have arisen of again shifting of values, owing to a new self-consciousness and acuteness in man? Is it not possible that we may be standing on the threshold of a period which, to begin with, would be distinguished negatively as ultra-moral? That's hilarious, given where we ended up. I mean, again, referencing Victorian England, what I assume was Victorian England, everybody was judged by social credit. That's what gossip is. And ultra-morality points the finger at someone else so people don't look at you. If you uphold your... I said this in another video. With the crashing of the economy comes an increase in conservatism. And that just goes hand in hand. And my personal belief of why that happens is because when the economy crashes, it's a hell of a lot easier to make money by means of illegalities. And if you're performing illegalities, if you're doing fuck shit, it's easier to do that if people aren't looking at you doing it. And it's easier to hide you doing bad things if you're projecting that you are a good person. Which explains the rise of conservatism, because then people are saying that they're great people, this ultra-morality, and then there are people that see them condemning others and they think, I need to get in line, I don't want to be condemned. And so they follow suit. And then you have this huge rise of conservatism, which then further hides everybody doing illegalities. So the origin is that people are doing illegalities. The end result is that everybody's performing ultra-morality as a means of not being condemned. Even if they're not doing anything, they just simply don't want the finger pointed in their direction. So they'll point at someone else and say, it's not me, it's them. Which forces everybody into, it's not me, it's them. Tribalism. Ultra-morality is a form of tribalism. Witch hunt. The Salem witch trials happened at large because it was a means of condemning, especially women, people in positions of power where other people did not want them. So, like a bar maiden was one of the peoples that was condemned to be hanged or however it happened. And the reason she was condemned was because she held all the gossip of everybody in town. Or quote-unquote white witches. Herbalism was another thing that people got condemned at large for because they held power. They had the means to heal. They also lived socially disconnected from others, which was a sense of tribalism. You're not one of us. We cannot abide that. That's this ultra-morality. It's a sense of control. Nowadays, when, at least among us immoralists, the suspicion arises that the decisive value of an action lies precisely in that which is not intentional. That begs when it's concerning specifically morality and not relationships. Altruism. That's saying altruism is holier than intending to do a good thing because you don't know the intention behind doing the good thing. It could, again, be to hide the bad things you've done. The gray in the area, bad people can do good things and good people can do bad things. And that's where you need to use discernment to figure out, what actually exists. That which is not intentional, and that all its intentionalness, all that is seen, sensible, or sensed in it, belongs to its surface or skin, which, like every skin, betrays something, but conceals still more. I think we're saying the same thing. In short, we believe that the intention is only a sign or symptom, which first requires an explanation, a sign, moreover, which has too many interpretations and consequently hardly any meaning in itself alone. That morality, in the sense in which it has been understood hitherto as intention morality, has been a prejudice, perhaps a prematureness or a preliminariness, probably something of the same rank as astrology and alchemy. But in any case, something which must be surmounted. The surmounting of morality, in a certain sense, even the self-mounting of morality. Let that be the name for the long secret labor. That's smelling your own farts, the self-mounting of morality. I am more moral than you. Tribalism. Long secret labor which has been reserved for the most refined. Oh. The most upright and also the most wicked consciences of today as the living touchstones of the soul. So I think it's saying exactly what I said is look behind. Bad people can do good things. All right, I did not read 2 points, but luckily 33 is not that long. Because I ranted too much, I'm so sorry. It cannot be helped. The sentiment of surrender, of sacrifice for one's neighbor, and all self-renunciation morality must be mercilessly called to account and brought to judgment, just as the aesthetics of disinterested contemplation, under which the emasculation of art nowadays seeks insidiously enough to create itself a good conscience. That is an interesting point. Why is art seen as a feminine trait? Just something to question. There is far too much witchery and sugar in the sentiments for others and not for myself. I appreciate that. Okay, so there is this notion that I have, which is selflessness is actually selfishness. Because in order to be what society understands to be selfless, you're putting yourself in a position when this world is imperfect. To be selfless in an imperfect world is to put yourself in a position of needing help from everybody around you, needing a community who catches you when you fall, and you will fall because you will be used. So to be selfless in an imperfect world is to rely on other people's resources, meaning that you are being selfish. You're being selfless as a means of saying you are morally more just than someone else. It isn't because it's what is actually needed. It's what you wanted. And that goes into the argument of what is evil is what is unnecessary. And there are levels to what is unnecessary. Sure, if you tax your neighbor the cereal that you just lent a homeless person, that's not, the same as lopping off your foot and then relying on everybody to carry you around. I don't know something better there. That was what I came up with. I'm sorry. It's not really a good metaphor. There's a better one. You can find it. There is far too much witchery and sugar in the sentiments for others and not for myself. For one not needing to be doubly distrustful here, and for one asking promptly, are they not perhaps deceptions? That they please him who has them. Yeah, that's want, not need. I want to appear this way. It makes me happy to be this way. That's a lack of altruism. Altruism is, I guess that's the values that you would have been raised with, that he says is supremacy by which aristocracy lives in. Because, again, for 1840 to 1890, the working class wouldn't have had time to be considerate. And then judging others. Do they have time to be considerate, and how are they using that time? What are their considerations? Are they being considerate of other people, or are they being considerate of others to force others to be considerate of themselves? At which point, why not just represent yourself accurately? Him who has them and him who enjoys their fruit, and also the mere spectator, that is still no argument in their favor, but just calls for caution. Let us therefore be cautious. Right. I think he also, in prior points, I know he also in prior points said, let your friends show their asses so you can figure out who they actually are. Create an environment comfortable enough to convince others that they can be who they actually are at the core. And then you can decide happily whether that is something you can live with or not. Okay, bye. Enjoy yourselves. Don't take life too seriously, but take it seriously enough. Hold yourself accountable as well as holding other people accountable, but then also mind how to be able to still enjoy things, because if you don't enjoy life, you'll suffer, and suffering sucks. Don't do that. Okay, bye.